Okay, so tonight we have as our guest speaker Kris Nordholz. Kris is the CEO and one of the founders of Full Media. I'll let Kris explain in a second his background, but Full Media is his background and what the company does. But the reason I wanted Kris in here was really for two purposes, and we're going to kind of explore that through the interviews and dialogue tonight. The first purpose is that he set up a successful business, and he and his partners have set up this successful business at a time frame when, on the one hand, people say it's the best time to start a business. On the other hand, you have to say, what, are you crazy? Starting when, everybody else is kind of retreating and backing away from it. But these guys have done an amazing job. I have a former student that's there, and one of their investors is a friend through some of the nonprofit stuff that I do as well. So I've been able to really watch from afar at how successful they've managed their business and grown it. And then the second thing is, perhaps, as relevantly as the first thing, is that, what they do and what they can do for companies is pretty phenomenal. And these are some folks that have really harnessed and keep up with, because they have to, everything that's going on in the real digital world. And so, I thought it would be of tremendous value to have Kris in here for both reasons. One is the perspective of the entrepreneur, a little further down the road than our guest from last week, Pete Patzisis, who's only 6 months into his latest venture, but would also add value because of the nature of what they do. So with that, Kris, why don't I ask you to briefly tell us who you are, how you kind of got to where you're at in terms of running Full Media, and then also explain to us a bit about what Full Media does. Okay?
Right. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that, Bill, and excited to be here with everybody. My background really is not technology or even marketing, for that matter. My undergrad degree was in finance, and then I had my MBA, and my MBA, the focus actually was in marketing. But when I first got out of school, I had worked in corporate finance, had worked for a venture capital group at one point, was the VP of operations for a sort of a mid-sized logistics company, and so I really consider my background to be corporate finance and operations. A number of years ago, I found myself, as things worked out, working for a digital agency. Had been brought in sort of as their COO/CFO. It was a company that had been around for a few years, and they were doing pretty good work, but had just never really been able to figure out the business side of things, and not really figured out a way how to scale it and make it profitable. And I had joined them. This is a number of years ago. Ended up buying into the business. Was there for a few years. Just sort of had a parting of ways with one of my partners there, and we ended up, a group of us started Full Media right at 4 years ago. April the 1st was our 4-year anniversary, and it's going well. There were 4 of us initially. We just have hired our 22nd person. And so, as you had mentioned, we started at the best or worst possible time, depending on how you look at it. What's funny is when we started in the spring of 2008, that was really right at the start of the downturn. And so I don't know that we knew things were about to get as bad as they got. If we had known that, maybe we wouldn't have started the company. I don't know. But I do think, looking back, it probably was a great time to start a business. Just we were had low overhead, no debt, no expectations, and a lot of the people we were competing with had probably gotten bloated. We're thinking about things in a way that no longer was viable as the economy started to turn down. They might have had debt, and so we just found ourselves in a really good situation to be able to compete, because we were able to move quickly and do things that maybe some other companies who were set in their ways weren't willing or able to do. So as far as Full Media, what we do, the way we typically describe it at a very high level, our vision is that we want to help organizations, regardless of size or industry, grow through a more effective use of the internet. And so we work with big companies, small companies, for-profit, non-profit, product-based businesses, service-based businesses. It really is all across the board, the types of organizations we work with. And the way that we try to help those organizations grow through a more effective use of the internet really falls into two main categories, and we have two departments within full media is sort of how we think of ourselves. The first is what we refer to as our production department, that for the most part we create websites. And so we have an in-house team of graphic designers that do the artistic look and feel of a website. We also have an in-house team of programmers that do the technical components of a website, so content management systems, e-commerce solutions. We've actually done a decent amount of custom software development for clients, although we're usually pretty selective about those projects. And so everything creatively and technically that happens when creating a website or an intranet portal or an iPhone app, it doesn't have to be a website, but I would say probably 80% of the work we do on the production side is a public-facing website, and that all happens on the production side. The second department is what we refer to as internet marketing. So once you have a website, whether we created it or not, we have a lot of clients who didn't create their website, but once you have a site, how are you marketing yourself through the internet? And so search engine optimization, paid search marketing, social media marketing, email marketing, what we would refer to as online public relations, just how are you leveraging blogs and forums and online media to promote yourself, whatever that needs to look like for a particular client, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. And so we feel like within those two departments, there's almost nothing that an organization might need when it comes to really leveraging the internet as a part of their growth strategy that we can't help them with. And so that's sort of a long elevator pitch, but that's sort of how we think about what we do.
Now tell us a little bit. You said you got started, just to reinforce, on April Fool's Day, 2008, which I've done some crazy things that day as well, life-altering things. Your partners, tell us about the four of you. Was one person technically competent? Another person had good connections? Somebody else had grown up in the industry? What's your team like, I guess, when you started?
Yeah, initially, three of the four of us had been together at our other agency. And so one of my partners, Kevin West, who is one of the original four, Kevin is both a designer and a programmer, which is pretty unique, obviously, in that he's creative artistically as well as technically proficient. And certainly that was huge for us in the early days, because effectively we were able to have a design and a programming department just with him. And we joked that the first year or so before we really started hiring new team members, we were real careful about letting Kevin drive by himself. And, if something had happened to Kevin in the early days, we probably would have been in real trouble. Kevin had the design and programming skills. Robbie Monk and myself, who had been at the other company as well, Robbie had done sales at the other company, but also had pretty extensive internet marketing experience, so search engine optimization, that sort of thing. My role from the beginning, again, I sort of think my focus is corporate finance, operations, and sales as well. So I've carried a lot of the load when it comes to selling and just getting out in front of clients, things like that. And then our fourth partner, Davis White, had not been at our old company. Davis and I actually grew up together and have a somewhat similar background. He's a finance major. We went to the University of Georgia together. And he had a pretty varied background, as had I, in finance and operations and project management. And so when Davis joined us, he was also selling, also just, helping in terms of operation and growing the business. But also, along with Robbie, Davis and Robbie were really the two. As our internet marketing client base started to grow, Davis and Robbie, in the early days, were managing those clients, creating content, just all the things that go into internet marketing. So that was kind of the breakdown of the original four. And then it's grown, we have just hired talented people that had skills in their different areas. And so at 26 people now, about half of those people are on the internet marketing side. I think we now have 10 full-time internet marketing analysts that are working with our clients on managing search engine marketing campaigns, managing social media campaigns, what have you. And then about half of the business or half of the team is on the production side. And within the production team, it's split about half and half between designers and programmers. So I think we now have 4 designers, 5 programmers. We have a full-time project manager, a couple people that do sales. And so we're excited. We feel like we really have started to put together a really phenomenal team with a lot of diversified skills.
Now, if I remember correctly, you're either just opened or you're about to open up a third office, is it?
That's right. 2 years ago, we opened an office in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and now have 5 people in that office. And then our intention is to open a third office, maybe even by the end of this year, in Greenville, South Carolina.
Now, how do you decide to open an office?
Yeah, part of our thinking there, just taking a little step back, our industry traditionally has been dominated by 2 ends of the spectrum. On one end are freelancers. Sometimes it's one person, maybe working part-time or full-time, or it could even be 2 or 3 people that have an actual company, but just a smaller team of people who may be good at what they do, but obviously a team of 1 or 2 or 3 people probably can't replicate the skill set of a 22-person team. And so on that end of the spectrum are kind of the freelancers. On the other end of the spectrum are the traditional agencies. Maybe it's a true web agency. Maybe it's just a traditional advertising or PR firm who's trying to get into digital media. And those firms, like us, probably have a more diversified skill set, more expertise maybe across a broader array of skills. But those companies traditionally want to work with big clients, and so they're more expensive. Their business model is set up to provide service to big clients. And so sometimes, even though they might work with small to mid-sized companies, they may not provide a lot of service to those companies. When we started Full Media, we felt like we wanted to address the huge group of companies that fall in between those 2 extremes. Those companies out there that are big enough that they know they need more expertise and service maybe than they can get from some freelancers, and they're willing to pay for it, but they aren't so big that they can justify spending $100,000 a year, like a traditional agency might be looking for. And so we're trying to service that market, those people who, again, can spend money for more service, but they're falling under the radar screen of a lot of traditional agencies. So knowing that's the market that we want to go after, we feel that communities like Chattanooga, Greenville, South Carolina, maybe even Nashville or Birmingham, Charlotte, those communities have a lot of companies who need help, people who fit our target audience, but they don't have as much competition, or we wouldn't have as much competition in a market like that as we would, say, in downtown Atlanta or Chicago, or a bigger market like that. And plus Chattanooga and Greenville being located in northeast Georgia, those are easy, 2.5 hour drive to get there, which in the early days of opening a new office, it's important for the existing staff back at an existing office to be able to get there to service clients, so we can justify having 5 people in that office to service those local clients. So that's really, I won't say it's super scientific how we pick those communities, but that's some of the thinking behind that.
Now, what have the biggest challenges or difficulties been in getting your business to where you want it to be? I mean, what were the hurdles you had to pass? Was it not enough cash, not the right mix of talent, or finding the right people? Or tell us a little bit about how you've gotten to this point.
Yeah, I think those are good questions. I mean, there's obviously, you probably never have enough cash. There's always more that you could do. And finding good people, we've been very fortunate to find a lot of good people and bring them on board, but that's always something that you have to be conscious of, especially sometimes with more technical talent. You know, on the internet marketing side, we feel like we can bring in talented people and train them the nuts and bolts of search engine optimization, things like that. Finding people who have experience as a PHP programmer and database experience, sometimes that can be a little bit harder just because that's a more defined skill. If I had to say our biggest challenge, though, it's probably helping people compare apples and apples when, you know, talking about our target audience. Because our industry is so young and so fragmented, you know, you could look at 100 web companies and no two would look alike. You know, again, like I said before, the freelancers and the big agencies, but then even within those categories, there are a million variations. Somebody might be really focused on design but doesn't have any technical expertise. Somebody might have technical expertise but no design skills. You know, some might focus on search engine marketing but not do social media or vice versa. I mean, it's all across the board. And so a lot of times our challenge is when we're talking with a prospective client, we really don't want to sell anybody anything. I don't ever want to talk somebody into doing something. We just try to educate them on where we think the opportunity is for them, how we think we can help them. And we feel like 9 times out of 10, it ought to be a no-brainer to work with us. If we're really adding value for clients, then hopefully that there shouldn't be too much thinking they have to do if we're really adding value. The challenge is helping people see that. You know, we're dealing with a creative skill, we're dealing with a technical skill, and so sometimes no matter how hard we try to educate people on why the approach we're taking is different than the approach somebody else might be taking and why our approach is better, sometimes it's just hard for people to see that if they haven't experienced it already. So I think a lot of times that's one of our biggest frustrations is, and again, it's no fault of the prospect. You know, it is a space that is still somewhat being defined. And so, but that's probably a challenge, is just really comparing apples and apples and why we're different from other people who may say they're doing the things we're doing, but we don't feel like they're necessarily doing them as well as we are.
One of the questions in my mind too that comes out after listening to you kind of talk about how you compete, compete really through education as opposed to any kind of hard sale, is how when somebody starts throwing price in your face, how do you handle that? If somebody absolutely insists that it's a price-to-price comparison, do you walk away? Do you try to take a different approach? Because really what you're doing is more of a value sell, and you're really trying to educate people so that they're well informed and understand, what they need first and foremost, and then secondly, what their options are for getting what they need. But do you get price thrown in your face a lot? Do you often end up just having to compete on price, or?
Well, we definitely get it thrown in our face a lot. I mean, if I had to point to one thing that probably was the reason we heard that we missed out on a project more than any other, it would be price. And to some degree, we're willing to compete on price in that our pricing is always a function of time. And so if we sit down with a prospect and we kind of talk through what it is they're trying to do with their website, creatively, functionally, whatever it is, the way that we give them a price is just based on the fact that we have created so many websites over the years. I think we created 100 sites last year, and I'll probably do more than that this year. And so we can sit down and understand what somebody's trying to accomplish, and we basically say we think that's going to be a 90-hour project, just based on other sites we've done that have a similar scope. And if it's a 90-hour project, it's probably an $8,000 or $9,000 website. Our typical hourly rate somewhere between $85 and $110 an hour, depending on what kind of work it is. But in that scenario, we might give them a fixed price of $8,000 based on how long we think it's going to take. If they come back and say, well, we only have $6,000 to spend, then, we can possibly, in that situation, could sit down and say, okay, well, based on that, we know that we can maybe save some time here in terms of project management or here in terms of design, and still hopefully give them the best and most value they could possibly get for $6,000, but get within their price point. Now, there's obviously a floor that we just can't go under. I mean, if somebody comes and says that somebody told me they could build this site for $1,500, then, we know that we just can't do anything of any real quality for $1,500, and we would probably walk away from that. And so I won't say that we never compete on price, but you could always go get a website for cheaper than Full Media can do it. I don't think anybody could give you more value for your money than us. At least that's our goal. If somebody can do more for the same money than we are, then I want to figure that out, how they're doing that, so we can do more for that money the next time.
Well, so it sounds like, what you really do is you present a lot of possible options, and then you make adjustments. And if you find a client that'll work with you, sometimes it's as simple as asking what kind of budget they have, or sometimes if they can articulate and share with you their specific goals, then you can sort of narrow down to a package that will help them, even if it's not the ultimate, package, but you can still retain or get that business just by being somewhat flexible and adaptable. So you're not just too locked in. But again, you also know what you don't want to do. You don't want to go down to the very bottom and give away your services, because that'll establish a new price point, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that I've joked before that I feel like our best client is somebody who has worked with another web company in the past, and that's not a knock on all web companies, but a lot of times somebody who's been through the process before realizes the value of a team that is going to customize a solution and really try to add value. And our retention rate is great. When we get an opportunity to work with a client, we get a lot of repeat business, because I think once they've been through the process, they realize the value of working with our team and the service that they get and the problem solving that they get. And so usually I feel like if we just get an opportunity, we'll have a client for a long time. But again, sometimes it's hard if somebody's never been through the process and we quote them $7,000, and we know that's a great price. We know another agency that might have our expertise would charge them twice that for the same product. But then somebody else is saying, oh, we'll do the same thing for $2,000, if they haven't been through that process before, that they may go that route. But a lot of times those people end up coming back around, later on after they've gone and found out that they didn't get the same thing. So
I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction. I want to, thinking through these students, everybody's working on a business plan, and many of these folks are interested in actually moving forward on implementing maybe this business or another business. What would you say, starting out, if a company is more or less bootstrapping and if they don't have a lot of money, are there 2 or 3 key things that they ought to do that are worth the investment, whatever that means, in both time and financial resources from a web marketing perspective? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say to some degree it does depend on what you're trying to accomplish. It does depend on your business model and who your target audience is and what it is that you're selling. We have, a lot of clients that we do internet marketing for, and every engagement's a little bit different. Some of them we're focused on organic search marketing, and some it's paid search, and some it's Facebook and Twitter, and others it's email marketing. And so it's hard to say that there's a one hard and fast thing that everybody ought to do. If I had to give a piece of advice on that, I would say pick a strategy that you can be consistent and persistent with. Whether that's just trying to create good content that the search engines will find, whether that's engaging people through social media, whether that's an email newsletter. The biggest mistake we see people make when it comes to internet marketing is they bail out too quickly. They launch a Facebook page, they get real excited about it for a month, and then after a month they get frustrated because they don't have 20,000 fans and they give up on it. Or they try search marketing for 3 months, they don't triple their web traffic, and they bail out. And so I think whatever it is that you're going to do, you need to be committed to just doing it consistently, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're hiring a group like ours to help you with it, whatever that is. I think that consistency and discipline and patience is what really ends up paying off.
Okay. Now, consistent, persistent. I've seen a lot of that. I come from more of a industrial marketing background from way back, and you run the risk of getting people interested and then effectively chasing them away too, in the sense that they don't think you're serious, and so they may not give you that second chance, or they may not allow you to kind of close that deal. I think with the web, it's all out there. We often talk about that just internal to the university, that you sort of have to assume that we're in an era where whatever you put, and even if you don't put it, somebody else has the capability of putting your image, of putting your words, of taking things out of context, of really impacting your lives and or your business without you even knowing about it. And so it's a challenge. What about things like getting back to my question a little bit? Would you suggest that people start out maybe with if they're bootstrapping, would you suggest they start out with something like a Facebook page as opposed to a website? Or let's assume for a second that their goal is to kind of get their brand out there. Maybe they're doing a preliminary thing. Maybe they have a service. Maybe it's not convenient for them to sell via the web yet. Or do you think they should, go with a website, or, how free should they be? In other words, before they should really get serious.
I do think Facebook is a great way. And again, if it's a service-based business that's local, if we work with a lot of physician groups and dental practices and contractors, heating and air companies and roofing companies, and people who are marketing in a specific geographic market. I think that Facebook can be a great way to market to those folks, that you don't have the expense of creating a website right off, but you can create a presence. It's a way for people to contact you. And then a lot of that kind of marketing is just like traditional networking. You go to the Chamber of Commerce event, you meet people, and you invite somebody to lunch, and they introduce you to somebody that might need your services. And so that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the persistence of just put yourself out there, engage people. I mean, all you're trying to do is build relationships, regardless of whether it's search marketing or Facebook or email marketing. You're trying to build relationships with people. And so a lot of times I think it's a matter of you want to educate people on what you do. You want to give them a glimpse of who you are, a personal feel to it. But a lot of it, I think with any of this, you got to fight the urge to overthink it. I think a lot of times people get into social media marketing and they feel like every post needs to be intended to close a sale. And there could be a time for that, but I think really all you're trying to do is, again, engage people. I mean, it's funny with full media, and I think I might have told you this, Dr. Lightfoot, but we, with our Facebook posts, we probably post, sometimes we might post a couple times a day, sometimes maybe once every couple of days, and sometimes it's a link to an article related to our industry, or maybe we do a client spotlight or whatever it might be. But a lot of times it's just silly stuff. I mean, we have a tradition that we started early on at the company that every Friday the whole team goes out to lunch. And so maybe we just on Friday come in and say, hey, we've got company lunch today, and we're debating, do we want to go eat at Chick-fil-A or do we want to go eat at McDonald's? Where do y'all think we ought to eat? And we might have 6 or 7 people that jump in and give their 2 cents. And the reality is with those kind of posts, 99% of the people who follow us, I think we maybe have close to 1,500 fans, but 99% of the people who follow us, when they see a post like that, they just ignore it. Consciously they ignore it. But our hope is that in a few weeks, when somebody who happened to see our name is out at dinner with their brother-in-law, and their brother-in-law says, my company's looking to redo their website, do you know anybody that does that? We want them to think of Full Media, and so those little silly things, while they don't lead directly to a sale, it's just a way to stay in front of people. And maybe for a brief moment, they read that and they're thinking about Full Media. So I think for a young business that's looking to leverage social media, just get started. Whether it's Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, just get started. Try to add value to people by educating them, maybe entertaining them a little bit, and just building relationships with people. And I think if you do that consistently in time, when it comes time for somebody to make a buying decision when they need your product or service, the chances they buy from you go up exponentially just because you've been investing in them and engaging them in some way.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, it's really kind of maximizing your use of networking in all its forms, whether it's digital networking or as you point out, just being involved and engaged in your community, so that sort of one thing plays off the other thing.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of these students are working on either not-for-profit businesses or businesses that have definitely a social purpose. Are there differences in terms of how you might work with a not-for-profit whose goal is maybe fundraising versus businesses that are trying to sell products and services?
Yeah. Possibly. I mean, I think at some level the principles are similar. I think one thing for nonprofits, and we work with some nonprofits, actually spoke a couple weeks ago at a conference for the leadership of the Southeastern Boys and Girls Club group. So this was executive directors and staff members, some board members for local Boys and Girls Club organizations throughout the Southeast. And we had a pretty extensive conversation about fundraising via social media. And if I'm honest, I don't know that social media is a great way, at least today. This may change as younger audiences get to the point where they can be big donors. But I think today, social media is not a great fundraising tool in terms of direct fundraising. I keep my Facebook page up, and suddenly some big donor is going to come in and write me a $20,000 check. I don't know that we're there. What I do think you can do is, like I was just saying, is you can build relationships with those donors and strengthen relationships with potential donors using social media. So like one thing we talked about with the Boys and Girls Club group, and this was just an idea that we threw out. Some of them thought it was interesting and said they were going to try it. I need to follow up. But was the idea that most Boys and Girls Club groups do a Youth of the Year. We were talking about the potential of doing a Youth of the Day through your Facebook presence, so that every day at the club you pick out one of the kids who did well on a spelling test that day or made the middle school basketball team or whatever, and you shoot a little 20-second video clip just with an iPhone or a flip video camera, and you interview them, and you're doing a few things there. Number one, you're getting the kids excited. You're probably engaging their parents. You're getting other kids excited that maybe they want to be the Youth of the Day tomorrow. But you're also potentially engaging corporate sponsors. You're engaging donors. You're engaging partners and board members, because you're kind of giving them a glimpse behind the scenes. Suddenly you're not just a nonprofit that wants them to write a check, but it's little Billy who made his middle school basketball team and couldn't be prouder of himself. You're putting a face with the organization. So I think that those are things that nonprofits can do, leveraging the internet, social media, your own website, an email newsletter, whatever it is. is just finding creative ways to educate people on what it is you're doing, the impact you're having on your community, and why if they write that check, why if they come to the fundraising dinner next month, who that is impacting. It's impacting the kids in the case of Boys and Girls Club, or whatever the nonprofit is. I think those are some ways, and for-profits can do that too, but I think those are some ways that nonprofits can really leverage social media to make it a personal connection, you know.
Yeah, very good. No, I think that's, it says a lot in terms of, I guess, the things that just stand with me about what you've said so far is that consistency, the persistence that goes along with that, and also maybe not overreaching in the sense that, I know you don't want to try to ask for the order. You don't want to try to, you want to friend raise before you fundraise is, I guess, what I'm saying. You have to get people trusting you. You have to get people buying into whatever it is you're doing before they're really going to be willing to embrace. We often talk about, there's two things that are often competing, if you will, that you've got to figure out how to use when you're looking at why people would give you money if it's a not-for-profit, or why people would give you money to buy your products or services. On the one hand, there's sort of the fact-based information. What are the benefits if I buy your product? What am I going to get as a result of buying your product? On the other hand, and this is particularly true in the not-for-profit world, what's the emotional appeal? In other words, am I going to feel guilty if I don't? Am I going to feel good if I do? So not reaching too far, but instead trying to get people to believe in you, buy into your concept, buy into your business, trust you. And that's what the web can do for you, is it can help you build that relationship, build that trust, build that body of friends that then, God willing, and a lot of other things happening, can lead to getting the financial resources you need to sustain your business.
Yeah, I think
does that sound reasonable?
No, I think that's exactly right, and I think it can take a lot of different formats too. I mean, we were laughing the other day, and I think this is an example of mentioning full media's Facebook and just some of the different ways we use that. I mentioned Robbie and Kevin, who were two of my original partners. Robbie and Kevin, they're both super likable guys and funny and witty, and they kind of had this ongoing just picking at each other through social media. And they do it on full media's page. They do it on each other's page. It's always kind of making fun of each other, whatever. And it's funny, and it's always lighthearted. And at one point, though, I was like, guys, that's great, and I know y'all are having a good time, but let's tone it down. I don't know if all these people following full media want to hear you guys being silly with one another. But I was always amazed, because I would bump into people around town or wherever I might be, and people would say, hey, how are Robbie and Kevin doing? And they might not even know Robbie and Kevin. These weren't necessarily people that knew Robbie and Kevin, but they followed full media. And so we started to see this dynamic of where we were more than a company. We were just people that liked each other and were trying to have fun and doing our work. And I think that resonates with people. So I think when you talk about building friends and building a following, I think that can take a lot of different formats. Just letting people get to know your personality, again, just kind of engaging people in whatever way is appropriate for what it is you're trying to do.
Now, there's another thing you just reminded me of when we were talking over at your shop a week or so ago with Dimitri. You mentioned something that is also another, I guess, internet era phenomena, and that's really it relates to the type of people you hire, and it relates to the way in which you lead or manage your business. When I cut my teeth, 35 years ago, when I was first getting involved in any kind of business, it's kind of a command and control. You had the boss, and then the boss over the boss, and things filtered down. You weren't given a lot of autonomy. You really were, go do this. You did what they told you to do. You didn't do a whole lot more. Does that work today? Or, the theory being that people are better educated in general, and also in this networked world that most of you guys have grown up with. I'm a little bit older than the rest of you guys, or quite a bit older, but that I have, mostly embraced. I find that in my own approach, I try to hire the best people I can, and honestly, I'm there more as a coach and a guide. I don't tell anybody to do anything on a daily basis. I try to encourage them to do things and prod them and poke at them. But what kind of people should you hire? Do you want people that can just program, that you can say, hey, go program this, and they do it? Or do you look for people that can stand on their own 2 feet, that are maybe multi-talented, that can think beyond the obvious? And, what do you prefer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely think that the centralized command and control model, is no longer viable. I mean, it's very much a decentralized decision-making environment, a decentralized service environment. I mean, everybody at the company is somebody who can have an impact on a client, and so you have to empower people and trust people to do that in the appropriate way. As far as the people we look to bring on board, I think first and foremost is just high character people. We talk a lot about our core competencies. Our three first main core competencies are servanthood, humility, and team. And so we obviously want people who naturally fit in that kind of environment. And then beyond that, we just want people who are good with people, can get along with people, whether that's internally, whether that's with clients, whatever it might be, who are good thinkers that can just solve problems, and who are willing to go out there and do that. If they're waiting for me or Davis or Kevin or Robbie or Matt or whoever to tell them, hey, you need to go take care of that problem, we're probably going to be in trouble, because there's just things move too fast. There's just so much going on that it's impossible for any one person or any 5 people to know what needs to be done everywhere at any given moment. You've got to have people who can figure that out for themselves and then have the initiative to go do what needs to be done. So, which in some ways, I mean, that can be scary. Obviously, we all have to show grace with one another, and we're going to make mistakes and mishandle things from time to time. But I think in the long, and I'm guilty of that, trying to micromanage and things like that. But I think in the long run, if you have people who really buy into the vision and the culture and they want to do the right thing, empowering them to do so is going to work to your favor a whole lot more than it works against you.
Okay, well, we're going to start working towards the end. If any of you guys do have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat section now. Another couple of questions, getting back to the web and the use of social media. I'm intrigued. There's been this software tool, or I'm not even sure what you call it, website, Pinterest, has popped up on the radar screens in the last 6 months or so in a huge way. Before that, if you went back just a few years ago, it was Twitter suddenly emerged from nowhere, it seemed. And before that, Facebook kind of blew past MySpace. And, you could just keep going back and back and back over the last 15 years, and you see these web-based approaches, if you will, that suddenly pop on the scene, become the greatest thing ever. I mean, I remember the days when Yahoo was the huge elephant in the room, and Google didn't even exist, and you had Alta Vista, and you had AOL was the dominant player, and all that sort of stuff. And these organizations are sort of fading away. Do you see Pinterest becoming a major factor? It looks like it's image-based. It's heavily, I think, 70% women. Is it a fad? Do you see Facebook staying around forever? Do you see, what do you see? Can you give us a few clues about what your gut or maybe what your insight would share with us in terms of, the kinds of things that are happening out in the World Wide Web?
Yeah, those are great questions. Those are things that we probably struggle with every day. I would think that things like, obviously nothing is going to last forever. I'm sure at some point, mistakes will happen, and Facebook and anybody else will fade away at some point, whether that's 10 years from now or 100 years from now. It's hard to know. I think that Facebook, Twitter, obviously Google, some of those, they seem so entrenched at this point. It's hard to imagine any time in the near future where they're not significant players. I think something like Pinterest, I actually think it will stick around. Whether it'll ever be as widely used as Facebook, that's probably unlikely. I mean, it could happen. But I do think it's a unique concept, just the idea of visual, sharing content in a visual way. So what's interesting, and I think we've talked about this before, I feel like there's just going to become more and more fragmentation. The idea that there's going to ever be one dominant player. People say, who's going to win, Facebook or Google or Twitter? I think in reality, people are just getting so used to consuming information the way they want to consume information that we just get more and more fragmented. I know people who swear by Twitter, and I know people who swear by Facebook and don't ever want to look at Twitter. So I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying before about not trying to be all things to all people, and you're never going to tackle every opportunity out there. And so I think it's just important for an individual organization to figure out what makes sense for them, where can they best engage their target audience, and just go do that, and understand that you might have to miss out on some opportunity because you can't be an expert on everything that's going on out there. So.
Now, I do have one question. I'm going to change the nature of this question a little bit, Maria. She's asking what the base cost is for designing a website, but I guess what I would ask is that, if she's got a jewelry business and she's looking to launch a jewelry business, if somebody was to, knowing that Full Media is not the lowest cost provider, there's other options, as you pointed out before. You can go to GoDaddy. There's even free places you can set up a website. What would be a reasonable budget, though, if somebody was to hire you, for example, to, for a small business, to launch a basic website that maybe had some relatively straightforward shopping cart capability, maybe linked to PayPal, for example, and a little bit of search engine optimization? And, is there a base package that you would suggest or that you have used working with small entrepreneurs, small business folks?
Yeah, I would say that our typical project, just, when I look at every 10 projects we do, probably 7 or 8 of them fall into a $5,000 to $10,000 range. Now we have some sites, and so that might be on the below that $5,000 range. And so for a brand new site, a startup, we would probably try to structure something a little bit less than that, $3,000 to $4,000 range. When you start talking about e-commerce, selling a product through the web, using something like PayPal definitely makes it simpler. Again, like I said before, all of our pricing is a function of time, just how much time is it going to take us to do the work to create it. Typically, if it was a true shopping cart, where it was built on a shopping cart database with a live payment gateway that was taking payment through the site securely, that probably would be on the upper end of that $5,000 to $10,000 range. And then if you ended up having a lot of custom programming, it could be even more than that. But for a startup, if we could use a PayPal or something like that, that obviously saves us some time. It might be possible to do something like that in that $4,000 to $6,000 range. So, okay. And one thing about that, I know for a startup, that's a significant investment. One way to look, and again, the reason that it is what it is just that time factor. The reality is for something like that, we're probably going to end up with 40 to 50 hours in it by the time we do the custom design and the back and forth and the testing and the build out, just all the things that go into it. If we talk to a client, we feel like there's a way that we can scale it back and save ourselves time, then we certainly could lower the price based on that, hopefully. But one thing I will say, a way to think about it is if you build a quality site that's built on good technology and is going to last you, a site could last 4, 5, 6 years realistically. And so if you're spending $4,000 on a site, that seems like a big investment, but if it's going to last you 5 years, you're really investing in the future of your business. And so it sort of sounds like sales speak. I don't mean for it to, but I think that's one thing we try to do is help people maybe think of their web investment a little differently instead of just looking at it as a cost that I got to write this check and have a website because my competitor has a website. Really look at what kind of impact it can have on your business's upside, and then suddenly spending $800 to $1,500 a year. If you amortize that investment I just mentioned over 4 or 5 years, suddenly that's probably a pretty good investment in the future of your company. So.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I really appreciate your insights, both in terms of, the more traditional management and setting up of the business, and just, what does it take to really grow a business, and you got into a lot of different areas there, and then also talking a bit about what you do in terms of web marketing and social media, and we kind of covered a pretty broad range. But again, I think it's just valuable to have somebody with your background and somebody who's doing it right now to be able to share the observations with our students. Full Media, for those of you that don't know where he's located, he's literally right across the street from our main campus in Gainesville. So if you know Green Street and where the post office is, and even where the Jacobs building is, Full Media recently moved into one of the older homes on the other side of the street next to the Gainesville Times. And so they are one of our neighbors, and they've hired one of our recent graduates, Frankie Burns, started out as an internship there and is working there now. So we've got a number of different connections with Full Media. So
yeah, we really do appreciate our relationship, and everything we're now is done in terms of supporting us. We're really looking forward to the future. So.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Kriss, and we'll let you get so you can have a little bit of an evening left. And again, appreciate your input. And the rest of you guys, I'll hang out for a few minutes if you have any questions for me as we seek to finish off this course. And again, I'm going to shut down the archive, but thanks again, Kriss.
That sounds great. Thank you, guys.